Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge writer Ryan Harlan and Beavers Edge writer and KGO radio host T.J. Mathewson. We're coming to you guys here in Oregon State's final senior day, final home game of the season, as the Beavers will take on Washington State this weekend before concluding the season against Boise State next week. We're also coming to you guys following the shutout loss to Air Force over the weekend. No, you did not hear me wrong. No, it is not Groundhog Day. It is unfortunately an unfortunate reality for this Beaver team, as the bottom kind of fell out this last weekend in Colorado, and the Beavers had their worst performance of the season. So now they return home for the final home game of the year before taking on Boise State next week. So a lot to dive into on the podcast today. We really want to make sure to talk about some of the seniors that will be walking on Saturday, guys that have really meant a lot to the class, and TJ caught up with a couple of those guys this week too, so we'll be curious to get his thoughts on them as well. But yeah, fellas, good to talk to you as always. And yeah, let's just start with Air Force. Like, we sat here last week and said, okay, like, we could see a world in which they lost. You know, we all were talking, maybe narrow margin of victory, but they could get it done. I don't think in any of our worst nightmares we saw a 28-0 loss like that. Like, that's rock bottom for the season. So I'm just kind of curious how you guys kind of viewed that game, and ultimately just kind of how you viewed just the body language for the team throughout. It was just a really, like Trent Bray said on Monday, it was a tough watch.
At this point, what else are we or they supposed to say? Like, they're not good.
Yeah.
It is deteriorated to a point that I don't think anyone could have thought. Injuries, it doesn't even matter that they're injured. No. Even if you're not injured, based on some of the recruits you've had on your roster and where you've sort of situated yourself in the past 5 years of recruiting and talent acquisition via the transfer portal and such, to end up getting shut out by Air Force is it's terrible. I tried to explain it on the post-game show, but to be honest, the best thing I could come up with is that I'm out of words. Like, the disappointment, I think, was San Jose State the week prior, because you're at home in a game you should have won. You were favored at home, you should have won. Anyways, you go on the road to Air Force, and it's almost like at this point, like, is it possible to get more disappointed? Because you were already at rock bottom, I think, essentially. And now it gets to the point of, it's not only asking like whether or not the roster is talented enough, which it should be. It like now is when the discussion about people's thoughts about the viability of the coaching staff come up as well. And it opens a whole new can of worms. It's something that never should have happened. Air Force is not good. Yep. Beavers are a more talented team. And yet somehow they could not come up with an offensive plan to score a point because Ben Gulbranson got hurt during the week. Speculation to know when. But the fact that Giovanni McCoy and Jabari Johnson looked like they hadn't practiced all week, even though I'm sure they did. Look, jumping in there and just not looking good, man. It's not good. It's not good.
Ryan, you mentioned in your takeaways that you didn't think it would have been whole worldly better even with Ben under center. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on that a little bit. And like, for me, I don't think, and that's not an indictment on Ben as a quarterback either. I think like TJ, I think, for a Beaver metaphor, the dam has broke on this season. And at this point, I posted a question on the board today over at BeaversEdge.com. Like, what do fans want to see in the final 2 weeks? Like, a bowl game's not going to happen, and barring a miracle. I mean, I guess it's still mathematically possible, but barring a miracle, is it young player development? Is it seeing, a wide open offense, a more, aggressive defense? I mean, just things we haven't seen this year. And it's been interesting to see the responses. But yeah, Ryan, just your thoughts, and ultimately, like, do you think Ben would have really changed the result?
To be honest, not really. And the other thing that in my takeaway there that I kind of want to clear up a little bit is like I understand where people were coming from and starting Jabari for that game. Like I totally get where people were coming from, but at the same time, he also kind of showed too why he didn't get a significant run either. And I understand the whole thing about upside, but like he practiced all week, but he looked like we all saw it, in fall camp in those practices that he's still a developing passer as a quarterback, and he can't really read a defense well compared to McCoy or Branson. I just don't think you make a significant difference if and that's maybe just me kind of looking at like looking at the recent road struggles that this team has had in recent years and just seeing it that way. I think maybe you get points, but if the defense can't stop some of the stuff that what Air Force was doing in that game, like I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I don't think you're head and shoulders above. More so, I think you're probably a little better you know, cohesively running an offense together. But I think that's just where I kind of see it. And that's where I was kind of feeling about like, I don't think Ben makes a whole worldly difference for this performance at Air Force if he was in there. Um, it's just, yeah, if I'm wanting to see anything, it's more aggressiveness on defense on occasion. They may not necessarily have the personnel to do that given the injuries on that side of the ball. But offensively, I think just establishing an identity of what this offense wants to be and what they're expecting out of their quarterback, because I think part of where people maybe hinging their hopes on is that first 4 game stretch before the bye week, before Colorado State, um, where you at least saw some semblance of an offensive identity, and it seems to they've been going away from it since. And it's more of just I think establishing what that is going forward, I think is going to be huge in those next 2 games because I still have an incomplete on what this passing game is, and we only have 2 games left. We only have 2 games left. So that's where I kind of see it. I think establishing what this identity of the offense is going to be, and I know Beavers want to run the ball, but outside of that, like you can't just be really one dimensional. You still have to throw it down the field. You still have to keep up with more high powered offenses like a Wazoo.
Right.
Um, so that's what I want to see. I think these next two games is just to see what Gundy wants this offense to be.
Yeah, I think it's you brought up some great points there, Ryan, and the one I want to mention too is like if you had the Beavers haven't won a game since Jam Griffin's gone down. I think the longer that goes on, that continues to show, not including the game he got hurt in, obviously, but just in the game since. I think that shows how big he was, the running game. I mentioned you guys a couple weeks ago, was Jam the heart and soul of this team? And in some ways, maybe he was, right? And, you talk about how the team kind of fed off his energy, the way he played was a physical, nature. And then I think you look at just like if you had said last year, guys, any of the last couple years we've done these podcasts or talked that there would be a game where Oregon State would lose 28-0 to Air Force and your leading running back would have 6 carries. Like, regardless of how inefficient he was on those 6 carries, and I think there were like 4 that weren't great and 1 that was decent, like 6 carries for Anthony Hankerson, and I think Saladin Allah had 2 or 3. Like there were more quarterback runs than designed running back carries. And I think when you talk about what the identity of this team was coming into this year, we all knew, hey, this is going to be like, Iowa football. They're going to run the ball a lot and all this. And then they tried to transition to be like a passing team, Ryan and TJ, both you guys. And it's like this team doesn't have an identity right now, and it's like at the very least, like the bread and butter of successful Oregon State football this decade has been running the football. And Oregon State still has an offensive line that on paper is good at run blocking. I just wonder if now the lack of a commitment to a run game has led to lack of cohesion up there as well, because we haven't seen that group run blocking quite as well as they were earlier in the season. And it's still largely the same group. TJ, why do you think they've gone away from that run game so much?
It's really hard to have an identity when the line isn't playing well. Whether or not the lack of identity is causing that, once your line stops blocking, it's really hard to do anything, really. So, but in terms of just breaking it down, there's a couple different things. First of all, the running game's not as explosive when, first of all, your best rushing quarterback by, I would say, efficiency, maybe not explosiveness, Giovanni McCoy, is not healthy. Trent finally admitted it on Monday that he is banged up, right? And then it also happens to be that now teams don't really respect Giovanni McCoy throwing the football. Seems like he's lost all confidence in his ability to throw the football, almost all of it. It's just not. It's not
doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. So when you have those two factors, right, there's no reason for the defense to do anything besides shoot the gaps and defend the run. And it's hard when your running game is now not explosive, your line is not blocking as well, and the defense doesn't respect you. It doesn't matter if you have Iowa level talent to line up and run it at somebody if they don't respect it and they're willing to send everyone at it. And frankly, like maybe at the beginning of the season, the Beavers could line up against most teams and run the football fine. The way they play now and the regression that has gone on across the board on this offense, they can't do that. I mean, they're facing a service academy on a defense on the other side of them, and they couldn't just line up and run it at them. Like that's an indictment on a lot of things.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me is like if you're seeing those inconsistencies already, changing quarterback's not going to make that much of a difference either. Like that's just whoever's back there, whether that be Jabari, Giovanni, or even Ben. And that's partly why I felt that way. It's like if the line's not blocking, it's not going to make a difference. If they're not playing well, they're not playing cohesively together on the offensive side of the ball. It's like a change in quarterback's not going to make that much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point that we bring up now is like, I mean, I feel like now, like, TJ, again, to your point, what I just mentioned previously, you caught up with some of the guys this week, and, it's almost like, I'm not even going to say Oregon State's dangerous, but like now it's like, I'm just curious to see what they play with, particularly this Saturday, if anything. Like, are they going to, and it's something Ryan and I wrote away our takeaways, will Oregon State, for lack of better terms, go quietly into the night the next 2 weeks? Will we see something, just something? Because it's like, think about it, guys. Over this losing streak, what is something from those games that you can glean and go, that's something really positive going into next season? Maybe Saladin Allah, maybe a couple young guys on defense, Jaheim Patterson, Melvin Jordan. I mean, you're nitpicking for things that are positive during this losing streak. So does that extend to 7? Do you lose out to end the year? Which we probably expect that, but how do you do it, right? Washington State and Boise State could run a number on Oregon State with what we've seen recently. Can they, dig deep? Can the coaches put them in better position? I think there are so many things, right? It's better play calling, better execution. Like we've heard, maybe it's getting more aggressive defensively. Maybe it's opening things up and trying to be more wide open offensively. It's hard to say. We haven't seen, we haven't seen a jet sweep offensively in weeks, right? So just something differently to try. And like, do you guys think we'll see that? Or do you think we could see more of a packet in style based on what you heard from the players this week, TJ? It doesn't, particularly Jermaine Terry, it doesn't sound like this team is going to pack it in, at least the seniors, put it that way.
At least they'll have emotion on their side this Saturday. I would imagine they're going to play a little bit better because they legitimately right now have nothing left to lose, because if they lose out, season's over, no bowl game. And it's a terrible stain on like what has changed in a year, really. It's hard to wrap my mind around how much has changed in a year.
You went from 8-5.
A year ago was the biggest game in Research Stadium ever being played. And now
Rainiest too.
Right. So sure. Yeah. I think they're going to play with a lot of energy against Wazoo. Certainly. I mean, it's conference foes. It's senior night. Like, you have all of these factors in here. And on top of that, Wazoo's defense stinks. Like New Mexico, a not great New Mexico team ran up and down the field on Wazoo last week. Yeah. Shout out to New Mexico, Ryan. Shout out to New Mexico.
I will
So
say they had
were
a
able
lot
to
of
do that. So that alone gives the Beavers some energy this weekend. Boise
yeah.
State, I mean, they were projected as the 4 seed in the playoff rankings yesterday. So that like, what are we supposed to say with that?
Yeah, I was gonna
Ryan
say with
called, yeah, you called it,
Wazoo,
Ryan.
they struggled with the fly sweep. They did, and defending that when New Mexico ran it. So I'm like, if I'm Ryan Gunderson, I'm calling that because like that
Yeah.
is obviously something that they struggled with, and I know New Mexico and the record that they have, but I'm like, hey, credit to them for being able to pull out a win like that. That shows where that rebuild's going for them. But
Well,
like,
and you
yeah,
called it.
if that run defense is, kind of sketchy, it's like you better be attacking that this weekend.
Oh yeah, no, and well, and again, that's my thing is I'd like to see some fight from them. TJ's point on Boise, I had that game pencil, and I hate to do this, but I had that game pencil as a loss. I mean, before the season started, the Blues tough place to play, let alone 9 a.m. the day after Thanksgiving. It's gonna be a tough game. So that all being said, I think Oregon State's used up their rope, so to speak, and now we find ourselves with 2 games left, and one thing I do want to mention, just more so on the game, is like you guys said, I think there could be a chance for Oregon State to score. I don't know if Oregon State's defense is really going to be able to slow down Mateer in that passing. I mean, Mateer has been solid, this beyond solid, great at times, and this Oregon State pass defense, like Air Force didn't need to throw, guys. Like, that's something that I think Washington State can hang an ugly number. Earlier this week, it was a 12.5 point spread. It remains still a 12.5 point spread. I don't want to put pre-existing notions on this game, guys, but that seems a little generous to me right now for in benefit of Oregon State, just based on what we've seen in recent weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how all that shakes out, whether or not they can, play better. But I really want to talk to you guys about some of the guys they're going to be honoring, particularly Josh Gray, Simisi Saluni, Jaden Robinson, a few others, but those guys, come to mind at the
Josh
top of the
Green,
list. Yes, Josh Green as
hunters
well.
are people too.
Yes, thank
Hunters
you,
are
Ryan.
people too.
No, hey, that's why I have you guys to back me up with all these thoughts. But just guys that have meant so much to this program as far as being here when it was bad in 2018, 2019. 2019, I guess, okay, frustrating. And then seeing 10 wins, 8 wins, and then now back to a rebuild again. That can't be easy to go through. And you were kind of talking about it today, TJ, with Jaden a little bit, and he kind of talked about like his legacy of, what it was, when he got here, the highs, and then what he thinks it's going to be after he leaves. Like, if you strip away this season, and I know it's hard for Oregon State fans to do that in the here and the now, you still have to realize these guys were part of groups and big pieces to teams that won 18 games, the previous 2 years, and had really great rebound moments for Oregon State football following a couple bad years, or really a long stretch of bad years, I should say, without a bowl game. So, kudos off to, guys like Josh Gray, Josh Green, Jaden Robinson, maybe a guy like Alton Julian might be walking Saturday as well. I don't have that full senior list in front of me, but just other guys that I'm not mentioning, of course, want to give them credit too, but just guys who have been through the highs and the lows of this program.
Should be a lot of emotion. I think about Jaden. First of all, just want to make you feel a lot better about this, Brendan. Jaden signed when you were still in school. So
he did at 2018, baby. Let's go. I remember when he signed, man. Yep.
Put in some perspective of
man
how long Jaden's been there. It's wild. Just think about. I was in school at that point.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. But like legitimately, he has seen everything. I mean, he saw the depths of what the regime before Jonathan,
like he committed to Gary. Obviously,
yes.
He had to have committed to Gary,
and
or been real close.
A 1-11 Gary, and he arrived to a 2-10 Jonathan team to reach the peaks of what they were the last 2 years, and now you are right back on the other end of that cycle.
It's tough.
So
it's real. It's like real, man. It's real life.
Yeah, I mean, he's understood. Like life is about the sucky moments and the great moments. It's like how do you push through that, and how do you make it better for your team and for yourself as well. And he talked a little bit about that. I mean, Simisi talked about that as well. Doesn't seem like two guys, at least right now, or they talk to the media enough where they know they're not going to let too much emotion out in front of us, which is fine. They can save it for Saturday. But I could only imagine like just playing that last game. It's going to be crazy, and I hope for their sake, place sells out. There's a lot of fans show up, and we don't have another San Jose State situation where, I mean, the fan turnout stunk.
So here's the thing with that. There will be a good amount of fans there. They just might be in crimson and white.
Right.
Crimson
well,
and,
I can't imagine that would make them feel much better.
Like there will be, from what I've heard from people, like there will be a large contingent of Cougar fans at this game. Massive.
Easiest road trip of the year is coming down here.
There you go. See, TJ knows. So that all being said, like, Ryan, let's kick it back over to you, obviously. Talk a little Washington State. Like, obviously, and actually, let's get your perspective too. You're, one of your, close comrades on this team is Josh Green. He's saying that same thing, just kind of echo what TJ mentioned before we kind of briefly mentioned the Cougs.
No, I know like what that means to him, and kind of my general private conversations with him kind of off to the side. Like he knows how much this place means to him and the significance that this holds, and his kind of journey, kind of having a sort of a closing moment on that and what it took for him to get here. I know for him, like it's Saturday's gonna be really special. And for me myself, like I'm getting a little bit as well too, just being part of that journey to a degree, and being able to be part of some of those moments for him. My favorite moment of all time that I will forever hold was 2022. It was the year that the Beavers secured bowl eligibility with a win over Colorado, that dominant win. And I was calling that game on radio over on student radio, and I remember the moment so well. Luke Loescher, he was punting in that game, and I thought, okay, Beavers are going to punt here on this one series, and I expected to see 38 walk out there. I'm like, no, I see 37 walk out there. I just have this big old smile on my face, just absolutely excited. So I got to call his first career punt at Oregon State, which it's like, dude, I'm so proud of you, man. Like,
yeah,
for what it took for you to get here, and the adversity that you faced, and waiting your turn, waiting behind some guys that have been really solid at the punting position for Oregon State, and being able to get that moment, that was really cool. So that was something for me where I want to shout him out for that. And also too, cool moment.
Yeah, no, that's a cool deal, man. It really is. And those stories are special. And again, this senior class, I want to make sure to, definitely give them all a nod of the cap. This has been a tough year. And, we've talked to a lot of them throughout the year. They've been, solid, continuing to, put on a good face in the voice of this. And for all y'all listening, like we still talk to the guys every week, and it can be tough when you're in the middle of this losing streak, and I still appreciate these guys giving us good stuff every week. But let's go ahead and close out the pod here. Last 10 minutes or so we got. We already mentioned the Cougs a little bit. TJ kind of mentioned defensively, there's some opportunities with the Cougs. Their defense is not great. But offensively, like, I mentioned, John Mateer is the engine that makes this thing run. He leads them in passing yards, 26-6, TD to interception ratio, almost 3,000 yards passing, excuse me. And then he's their leading rusher, 700 yards on the ground and 12 touchdowns. So this guy is a problem. And I think that, what we've seen from Oregon State's defense, maybe we've talked about it. They'll play a little bit better at home. But I think it'll be a real tough matchup. And that's why I think you see the spread being what it is. And I think you're going to want to see, little wins from Oregon State this weekend in particular, and just see them play the best of their capabilities. Because like we just talked about, guys, it was not to the best of their capabilities this last week. And I think that's what the fan base just wants to see. If you fall, you fall, right? But I think it's the losing the way that they lost last week. There's got to be a get the taste out of the mouth kind of a thing. So I'm curious to see if what fight they have. Just from you guys, just final thoughts on this matchup before we mention some hoops and Wayne Tinkle and Scott Ruick's squads.
Well, here's one thing to note about the Cougs on the road this season, away from Pullman. So they started their first game away from Pullman. They played Washington. They won by 5 points. They went on the road to Boise State, and they lost by 21. They went on the road to Fresno State. They won by 8 points. They went on the road to San Diego State, won by 3 points. And then last week on the road at New Mexico, and they lost by 3. So they've set the precedent this year that when they play on the road, it's a little bit like the last couple of years of Oregon State football, that the team is remarkably different outside of their home stadium.
It's fair, yeah.
That's not a guarantee the game on Saturday will be close, but they've showed that they can play down a little bit on the road. There's not as much energy. They're not as clean on the road, and they don't put their foot on the gas as much, which is everything Oregon State needs to keep a game close. Just keep the fans engaged in the fourth quarter, please.
I agree.
Last game of the season, you're selling, what you're doing right now on Saturday, besides trying to win a football game, is you're trying to start the process of selling people on buying season tickets again for next season. So people leave the game and be like, man, I'm going to miss that atmosphere. Instead of, that stunk.
At least it's over.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the opportunity, I think, will be there. I still don't think the Beavers are going to win. We'll get into it fully in our predictions that come out on Friday, but
yeah.
For me, the thing I'm going to be interested in, because I was seeing before we hopped on, is that Jake Dickert's going to take a more active role in the defense for this game. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, see what that does and if that changes anything in game with how they play. But like TJ said, I think really this is going to be one of those games where you have to make this close, you have to make this competitive as possible, and you need to give fans a reason to show up for next year. Because if you kind of go out in a bit of a whimper in your final home game, I feel like a lot of fans are going to be like, so what's the point of me buying season tickets for next year? That's something where it's this weird kind of temporary, I think we all kind of agree, it's this weird kind of temporary period that we're in, this kind of pseudo independent schedule, but that support is still going to be huge. But if you don't give people a reason to continue that, I think it's going to do more harm than good if you don't come out there with some energy on Saturday.
Yeah, I think I agree with both you guys wholeheartedly. I mean, I think, yes on all counts. You need to show the fans something for next year. You need to, show these seniors that you care. I think the coaching staff said themselves, they need to be better. And I think, the coaching staff needs to call a game. TJ's point on Washington State not being as good away from home is very valid. Ryan's point on Jake Dickert taking an active role intrigues me a little bit because he obviously started on that side of the ball. That's his MO. It'd be like if we saw Trent Bray take a more active role on the defensive side of the ball. So nevertheless, be very curious. 4:00 Reser Stadium on Saturday, final home game of the year, the CW. Little housekeeping, want to make sure to mention the two hoop squads. Again, we have just one more week of football after this one, and then we'll be transitioning into hoops, where we'll be doing those podcasts and talking about the hoops teams. And again, kind of different stories for the two teams. Let's go ahead and start with the women's team. It's been a tough road to hoe here early on, Ryan, for Scott Ruick's women's team. They got a win over Northwest Nazarene, but have had a tough loss to Minnesota. They were a little bit better against Arizona State, but still a tough loss. And then they got two more ranked teams coming up. With how much inexperience there was with this team, again, like I've said before, never worried about a Scott Ruick squad. I think they will get better as the season goes along. It could be a little rough at times, and this year might be a bit of a retooling year, and that's okay because again, Scott Ruick is one of the best. He will get a competitive roster. They're together, so keep an eye on them here soon. But I want to spend the last couple minutes briefly talking about the men, fellas, as they're 4-0. And taking on the 4-0 Oregon Ducks today or tomorrow, as we're recording this podcast on a Wednesday. Again, a game that's probably going to favor Oregon, but if you're Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers, Gill Coliseum, that is a home crowd atmosphere if they can get it that way. Oregon has dropped games at Gill Coliseum in previous series before. If you want to re-engage the fan base and beyond just the wins over Utah Tech, Weber State, so on and so forth. You beat Oregon. That'd be a really interesting way to re-engage the fan base and kind of get the fan base that has kind of maybe drifted away since that Elite Eight campaign kind of back in. And as I look at this Beaver team, they're not gonna, wow you with star power, but they're just quietly solid so far. We'll see what happens when they finally take on a team who is a lot better, as far as like the quality of opponent. But call me quietly intrigued with this team so far, fellas. Like I didn't have many expectations, but I'm quietly intrigued.
This is the first. It is the first real test, but it's also the
Yes.
first time they are going to face similar talent. Or
Right.
Oregon's probably a step above, but
Yeah, of
to
course.
the point, it's like the gap is a little bit closer, and that's where the measuring stick of how's the chemistry. Their passing's been decent. DeMarco Miners, the point guard, has been good. They've been able to shoot and create space. So like it'll be big, and like you say, reinvigorating the fan base. I mean, even just going into the football weekend.
Right.
To get a win over
It's
Oregon,
true. It's true.
Just to get something,
Something positive,
right?
TJ says. Well, it's Ryan. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious.
no, like I like you, Brendan. I had low expectations for this team, but like I think what I've kind of seen generally from the fan base is like, oh, this team's looking a little more cohesive together and
Yeah,
things like that. And I think if you can win over Oregon, I think you bring a lot of people, kind of back into the fold and be, more behind this team than they have been in recent years. I like what I see from them. I like the size that they bring. I like the way that they've been passing the ball. Um, I also like Parsa Fala as
yeah.
well, transfer. I like him, kind of being at that 5 spot there or in playing that 4 at times. But like I like his skill set, what he brings. Like I have some intrigue with certain players on this roster where the
Yeah.
I think over time, I think a lot of them will get a lot better, of course. But like there's some guys that Wayne's put together this year that I think that will be some really key pieces throughout the season.
Yeah, it's definitely intriguing and something we're going to be keeping a close eye on, obviously, as we move and transition towards hoop season. And again, that game tomorrow night at Gill Coliseum. If you can't make it, we catch the game on ESPN Plus. Like I said, I'm definitely intrigued. This team showing some things early that could build on as the season goes along. So some optimism, Beaver fans. Like I said, keep your heads up because obviously lots of sports still here yet to go. 2 more football games yet left. Big shout out to Ryan Harlan, T.J. Mathewson. Thanks for watching this edition of the Edge Podcast. We'll be back with you guys next week.